It's said that there is only one God. The anthropomorphic personification of death was a staple in Western culture long before he, she, or it appeared in modern media. And of all the anthropomorphic personifications of concepts, death is by far the most common. Death is a concept that's hard to come to terms with, and in fiction we often see characters trying to find ways to weasel their way out of death by pleading with this personification, or trying to strike a deal with them, or just avoid it altogether. Sometimes death, him or herself, gets a character arc, but for the most part, stories with death, the character, aren't about death, but who is confronting them. So, unlike, say, Captain America or Starscream, this concept is extremely broad and the characterization is extremely varied in interpretation. So, since this character and this topic is so broad, instead of doing it chronologically like I normally do, I'm going to do it a little bit differently this month. So, let us now take a merry jaunt through some of the many pop culture iterations of death. The traditional image of death nowadays is that of a dude in a large billowing black cloak, and usually with a scythe. The first attested use of the term the Grim Reaper was in 1847, hence the scythe. He harvests souls. This interpretation is the most recognizable and is therefore the most common here in the West. So, history. Hades was the lord of the dead, but Thanatos was death itself, not Hades. Entities like Hades or Osiris or the Norse goddess Hel, they are death relevant, but not death personifications. They don't make the death happen. The most well-known myth involving the Greek Thanatos is that of King Sisyphus, tricking him into getting chained up so no one died for a little while. Of course, this did not last, and Sisyphus' eventual punishment was the whole pushing a boulder up a hill for eternity thing. This is the origin for many narratives involving tricking death, outwitting death, playing games against death, etc. The most well-known mention of death in the Christian tradition is in the book of Revelation. One of the four horsemen, death rides a pale horse, and hell followed with him. Well, actually, Hades. You know, remember how the Bible had some, translation wonk, which we went over back in the Hades episode? This is that. Continuity. Anyway, the four horsemen are really common. We're basically going to skip over that. Usually, death takes the form of a pale dude or a skeleton dude. Usually. Women are often associated with mothers and fertility and therefore life, meaning that death is usually male, but not always. In Polish, the word for death is feminine, because, some languages gender their nouns, and therefore the Grim Reaper was too. Death was also traditionally female in Lithuania, Spain, France, and some Slavic countries up until the 19th and 20th century. But the modern Grim Reaper that we usually think of is mostly influenced by English and German traditions, so this guy, he's mostly from that part of the world. So anyway, all of this business is ambling up to one of the most popular modern versions of death, the character, who comes in the form not of this guy, but of this in Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. Death here is a subversion of the typical Grim Reaper. She appreciates life, she appreciates the point, she's quite merciful, she sympathizes with mortality. She is also a caring, nurturing presence, in Dream's life in particular. He's the series protagonist and also a huge dick. There's not really anything cruel about her, unlike Dream, who again likes to fuck with your minds and using his powers of eternity and doesn't really care much for humans. Not Death. Having spent some time amongst the living, she gained an appreciation for the shortness and vitality that is life, and contrary to popular belief, she is not based on Tori Amos. Anyway, but the most common narrative purpose for death is the being what gets bargained with, and this is not a thing we see so much in Sandman, which really sets it apart in many ways, but that's the biggie. The Sisyphean desire to outwit death, trick death, or outplay him is very, very popular, and most of what we see in film and television is highly influenced by...
Vem är du?
Jag är döden.
Directed by Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal may be the most well-known and influential work starring death as a main character. It takes place during the Black Plague after a Swedish soldier gets back from the Crusades. And yeah, the chronology for this doesn't work at all, just, go with it. Antonius meets Death on the beach and easily talks Death into a game of chess in exchange for his life, if he wins, and Death just likes games, so he's totally down. But you know what? Hey, Antonius, what's so bad about dying anyway? I mean, it's the Middle Ages. Shit sucks.
Men ibland är det som det inte fanns någon där.
Det kanske inte finns någon där.
Då är levandet en orimlig fasa.
Ah, there it is. Antonius was never too keen on the whole religion thing, but faced with Death, he's not willing to go down without knowing, what's it all about. Death in this version waffles back and forth between darkly comic and gruesome and heavily existential. There's one point where Death shows up to collect some other guy who's not Antonius, and he tries to talk Death out of it, but casually, like he's asking for an extension for filing his taxes.
När jag har min föreställning.
Den är inställd. På grund av dödsfall.
In the end, Antonius loses the game, and Death comes for not only him, but his entire entourage, all of whom react differently to meeting Death: incredulity, despair, even happiness. This version of Death, as in the same guy from the Seventh Seal, actually shows up again in Last Action Hero. The entire conceit of this film is film characters coming to life. So someone puts on the Seventh Seal and then whoop, there he is. And now he's played by Ian McKellen, and oh my god, he's so Ian McKellen.
He's not on any of my lists.
He just seems to be following them around to f with them.
I was only curious.
So why are you
How's it hanging, Death?
Another obvious example of Seven Seal's influence is Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, the second entry to the Bill and Ted saga. Bill and Ted spend about half of this movie dead owing to robot clones from the future coming back in time to kill them.
I totally loogied on that good dead me!
And so when Death shows up, they run.
I can't believe we just melted Death!
Bill and Ted spend a fair chunk of the movie meandering through the afterlife before actually getting around to playing a game against Death in exchange for their lives. First, Battleship.
You have sunk my better ship.
And then Clue, because Death is a sore loser and wants to do it again. And then Electronic Football, and finally, Twister. Death is obligated then to sneak Bill and Ted into heaven and talk God into giving them their lives back.
They melted me.
Curiously, the narrative doesn't lose Death after he does his job, but he and some, alien engineers, because Bill and Ted, tag along to help Bill and Ted save their girlfriends and win the Battle of the Bands. So this is one of the more complete character arcs we see for Death. At first he's all insecure because he lost, but then he finds meaning in joining the band as a bassist and Melvining the bad guy.
Melvin.
Another in the vein of playing against Death and winning, we have The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, in which the two leads challenge the Grim Reaper to a game when he comes to claim their elderly hamster. When Death loses the game, in this case the game being the Limbo, he must become their best friend forever, though the more accurate term would be slave. The entire conceit of this series is based on Billy and Mandy humiliating Grim like the horrid little sociopaths that they are, while Grim bemoans his horrible lot in, unlife, not life, whatever it is. This show lasted 7 seasons.
You can't kick me because your brain is stupid.
A more recent example of playing against Death is Adventure Time, which carries also flavors the myth of Orpheus, where our hero ventures into the underworld to bring his wife back from the dead. Plant. Finn was tasked with babysitting a plant and immediately killed it, so he's gotta get the plant back. So, like in the Seventh Seal, Finn loses and all hope seems lost. But unlike Seventh Seal, Finn and Death happen to have a mutual friend.
Before I die, I'm honor bound to tell you, Peppermint Butler says hi.
What? You know Peppermint Butler?
So that gets him out of it.
Who are you? I'm Callista Flockhart. Who the hell do you think I am? I'm Death.
Death pops up in Family Guy a few times. In the first episode, he's played by Norm Macdonald, and then in all other appearances by Adam Carolla.
Gotcha! It's just me, Death. I'm here for the body.
The first time he shows up is an episode where Peter fakes his death, which in turn makes the real Death decide that, okay, that sounds legit, time to come with me. But when Death sprains his ankle, Peter has to fill in for him. So through this, Peter gets out of dying, and Death shows up on occasion to answer, existential questions, and of course make Seth MacFarlane jokes. So outwitting death or making some deal with him is really common, but if you aren't playing a game with death or making some kind of deal with him, maybe you're just straight up trying to escape him.
If I don't watch out, if I let down even for a moment, he'll get in.
A famous episode of The Twilight Zone features an old lady named Wanda who has started noticing death in crowds before he takes people, and has now spent God knows how many years holed up in her house, refusing to go outside or let anyone in because she knows death is after her.
I never go out.
Never?
I haven't been out for years.
But one day she finally caves, even though, yep, sorry Wanda. But look, he's baby Robert Redford. And then he's like blue stealing her. Death is such a cinnamon roll in this version, you know? What a great guy to transition people out of this life and into the next. Go, Wanda, go. You go with baby Robert Redford.
What you feared would come like an explosion is like a whisper.
Death has no master.
1964's Mask of the Red Death, based on the Edgar Allan Poe story of the same name, features another group of people holding up to avoid death, only this death is not such a cinnamon roll. This isn't just any death, but a very specific plague. In fact, there appear to be like a whole rainbow of deaths. Black Death, Yellow Death, Green Death. It's a death rainbow brigade. This movie stars the deliciously hammy Vincent Price, both as the evil Prince Prospero and, eventually, as the Red Death himself. The original story takes place during a horrible plague wherein a bunch of rich asshats hide in their castle while the Red Death ravages the peasantry below. But where Prince Prospero and his fellow rich folk in the original story just ignore the suffering, Vincent Price's version takes it a step further, okay, more like a giant Superman leap further, and is also a Satanist. When the Red Death shows up, Prospero's like, "Yay, it's Satan! You're here to, like, reward me for worshiping you, right?" No, sorry, Vincent Price. Death is a major backstory player in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where he pops up in Hermione's telling of how our MacGuffins came into existence in the first place. In this story, Death feels cheated when 3 wizard brothers evade a dangerous river that usually kills people. So he tells these 3 brothers he'll grant them some wish in a sort of deal with the devil setup. Numbers 1 and 2 die because of their arrogance, but brother number 3 evades death. You know, for a while, because he's humble. But of course not forever, you know, since Valor Morghulis.
He then greeted Death as an old friend, and went with him gladly.
It's weird that he'd greet Death as a friend since Death gamed the system like that. Well, maybe he thought his brothers were dicks too.
Alex?
The Death feels cheated motif is more central to the plot of the Final Destination series in increasingly goofy ways.
And you can just drop fucking dead.
Here, Death falls less on the human end, more of like a devious, translucent swoosh than a legit personification. But Death is an antagonist that schemes and has a presence, so I'm counting it. Death gets cheated out of Devon Sawa and his buddies in the first movie.
It was an accident.
In death, there are no accidents and no escapes.
Throughout the series, some of the characters manage to contrive some ways to escape Death's plan, but for the most part, the theme is that you can't cheat Death. And if you do evade death for a time, your resulting eventual death will be ridiculous.
I am dead.
Yes, well, the thing is, we've got some people from America for dinner tonight.
Who is it, darling?
It's a Mr. Death or something. He's come about the reaping.
Monty Python's meaning of life is in that Douglas Adamsian tradition of exploring human existence through absurdist comedy. The joke here is mostly about people's inability to face uncomfortable truths.
Good evening. This is Mr. Death.
This is a big theme in British comedy.
The Grim Reaper.
Hardly surprising in this weather.
Another popular concept in recent years is that of there being a bunch of Reapers on, like, a payroll, and Death being this big bureaucratic enterprise. In Dead Like Me, the dead sometimes become Grim Reapers, and it's treated like a mind-numbing 9-to-5 scenario, playing what amounts to indentured servitude as a, like, bad temp agency or something.
This is Rube. He's my boss. He's undead too.
Reapers here don't appear to have much in the way of powers.
Why couldn't we have taken a cab?
They can't walk through walls, or float, or anything, and they just take souls. Things called gravelings appear to do the actual work of killing. This TV show has a tone problem. Moving on. In the anime Black Butler, we see an even more explicitly bureaucratic organization. This one almost Men in Black-y with the way it goes about things.
It's just a job. And there is no place for emotion in a job.
And these guys were never human, and when people die, they just come and collect the souls. And souls come out like celluloid, this being all their memories. They each get a scythe, often anachronistic, like the celluloid, just roll with it.
Ding.
Also, this guy is the most popular of the Reaper characters, or maybe any of the characters by a lot.
I'm the queen of the Reapers, the ripest fruit there is.
Oh, Japan. And no, this isn't just coding. This guy has a huge crush on the titular butler.
At last our amorous adventure can begin anew. Oh.
Death sometimes has motivations other than his or her job. We often see Death wanting to learn about a thing or understand a thing.
I could introduce myself properly, but it's not really necessary. You'll know me well enough and soon enough, depending on a diverse range of variables.
In the book, The Book Thief, Death wants to contextualize a specific life, that of Liesel, who was a German schoolgirl during World War II, and who he saw a lot in that time, since she was in Germany during World War II. This is a first-person narrative by a character who is not the main character, like The Great Gatsby or Heart of Darkness. And Death is not in the story at all, unlike those previous two. So, obviously, since it's a point of view thing in a story in which Death is not a character, like he doesn't show up or give Liesel helpful advice or, make her a dress to wear to the ball or something, this works way better in the book than in the film adaptation, which exists. But usually Death wanting to learn a thing involves Death getting a girlfriend. Before we go into that, let's talk about the Death and the Maiden. Death and the Maiden was a popular art motif dating back to the 18th century. Ludwig Gleim wrote a poem called An den Tod, or To Death. Gleim is mad at Death because, his girlfriends keep dying, and so clearly it was because Death, totally had a death boner for these girls. He's like, hey brah, you don't even have lips brah, why are you taking all my girls brah? So Death and the Maiden is like a distant cousin to the Beauty and the Beast motif, that of Death as a lover. This is played with as a very on-the-nose theme in the original Phantom of the Opera, the book that is. But the Phantom, much as he will tell you otherwise, is not Death himself.
The strangest shadow is following us. Following? It was right behind us all the time we were racing.
In Death Takes a Holiday, some wealthy idiots have a near-death experience, and Death decides to stick around because he wants to know why mortals fear him so much. And so he makes a deal with this duke to stay at his place and eat his food and just jerk around for a bit.
Can you conceive how lonely I am when there is nothing that doesn't shun me, that doesn't fade as I come near?
Death starts a live journal. His love interest is Grazia, who seems to see marriage as a form of death.
I'm not ready.
All the other girls fear him, but not Grazia. No, she's not like all those other girls. So when in the end, Death straight up says, no, you have to die to come with me, she's like, it's cool.
I'm ready.
No, you can't come with me.
Yes, I can.
Would a single goddamn one of you trust me with the decisions I am making? I get it. I know who you are, and I'm down.
You see me as I am.
But I've always seen you like that.
And she goes with him, and it's awesome.
And as strong as death.
Death Takes a Holiday was agonizingly remade into... It is twice as long. Kill everything. It's ironic how much this movie makes you long for death. In this version, Death gives Anthony Hopkins some more time for putting up with him. The original works a lot better because the characters are all dancing around on the weird formalities of European aristocracy, so everyone's weird and stilted and unnatural, but it makes sense. Here, it's just...
Joe, you do get around.
That's your name?
And isn't it a lovely one? So sturdy, so straight.
The Monty Python scene was more realistic.
Mr. Death is a reaper.
The maiden in this movie does not follow Death into the great beyond. The sexy body Death took in the form of Brad Pitt pops back to life, and the lady goes, okay, I'll settle. So on top of being agonizingly long and boring, this one is problematic. Thanks for letting me use your body, bruh. I saved the best for last, as I think few would argue that Terry Pratchett's the death of Terry... Oh my god, there's no good way to phrase that. Discworld.
I am Death, the Grim Reaper of the Discworld.
This version is not only the most fleshed out, so to speak, but a combination of all of the above in a lot of ways. Death has appeared in every Discworld novel, although he was a main character only in 5 of them. He does do the occasional play games with you for your life thing, and he was originally a more sinister presence, but by the time he was a lead character, he had a more sympathetic and humorous personality. Death has an adopted daughter named Isabel that he's saved from the wastes. Why? Well, she says once that, he didn't feel sorry for me. He never feels anything. He probably thought sorry for me. This is in no way supported by the narrative, as Death clearly feels lots of stuff. Ennui, affection, regret, ennui. He's real big on the ennui.
I need to imbibe vast amounts of alcohol.
Vast amounts?
I need to forget.
But the real relationship that makes this version unique is to his granddaughter through Isabel, Susan Stohelid.
Would you like a drink before you go?
A cup of cocoa would be appropriate in the circumstances.
We see her in both of the Discworld adaptations that star Death. Terry Pratchett's Hogfather, wherein he is voiced by Ian Richardson, and Soul Music, where he is voiced by Christopher Lee, and it is adorable.
You haven't got a kiss for your old granddad?
The problem with both of these is that they are 3 hours long, each. In Soul Music, Susan has to take over Death's job while he's out trying to deal with all those emotions he totally doesn't feel.
I may have allowed myself a flicker of emotion. I can give it up any time I like.
Terry Pratchett's Hogfather features a similar premise, where Death has to stand in for the Discworld Santa equivalent.
You're supposed to say thank you.
Thank you.
And be good. This is part of the arrangement.
Yes.
Then we have a contract.
Both of these are a slog to get through because there's so much extraneous in there. This works way better on the page, but the truth is, for both of these, Death's portions are priceless and wonderful.
It is unfair.
Well, that's life, isn't it, Master?
But I'm not.
Terry Pratchett has gone on record as saying that he's received letters from terminally ill fans in which they hope that Death will resemble the Discworld incarnation. And he's also said that those particular letters usually cause him to spend some time staring at the wall.
I think a wise man thinks of death as a friend, if that death comes later.
Yeah. That comes from one of the last interviews that Terry Pratchett did before he died earlier this year, and illustrates why that version sticks with people so very much.
Would I give you a hand?
Death being greeted as a friend, what better way to cope with it? It's less about Death himself so much as how he is greeted. Especially if your brothers were apparently massive pricks. So, thank you for watching. Obligatory, Patreon. Not gonna be a vote this time, because, like I said last time, this one's going to be my choice, which I will do every 5 episodes. So, you think you know but you have no idea? Or maybe you do? I am pretty predictable. What is it? King Kong.